Welcome to the Daf Map, also known as Gemara Markings. We want to present a brief introduction to what we're all about. I must point out that this brief introduction is intended primarily for those who have great familiarity with the standard Daf Gemara. For those of you who feel that they don't have that level of familiarity, we have a more elaborate 45-minute introduction. Did you ever plan a trip? Did you ever want to know how to get from place A to place B? What do? You generally pull out a road map. For those of us who remember the old paper road maps, that's one thing. The current electronic media also provide road maps. One of the more popular ones, I think, is Google Maps. When you go to Google Maps, they also have an offering whereby you can see a satellite view of the area that also is mapped out. Now, when you're planning your trip and you want to get from place A to place B, the satellite map, the satellite view is going to be of basically no assistance. If you want to see where the agricultural areas are, where the mountainous areas are, where the desert areas are, so the satellite map will serve you well. But if you want to go from place A to place B and also take in all kinds of sites and byways and interesting diversions along your way, you would want to have a roadmap. Not only a roadmap, but you'd want to have a very detailed roadmap showing not the major highways alone, the interstates and the turnpikes, but you want to see those state roads, the county roads, even the dirt roads. You want to see the lakes, the streams. You want to see antiquities, all kinds of little notations that a detailed map would offer. Now, that's the mashal, that's the example. What are we referring to? We're referring to the standard Daf Gemara, the traditional Daf Gemara. The traditional Daf Gemara has a built-in marking to it, and that happens when a new Mishnah appears. You'll find, besides the beginning of a perek, you'll find when Mishnayos appear along the way, Mem Taf Nun Yud, with an apostrophe, abbreviation for Mashnisin, appears, and then when the Mishnah finishes, the beginning of the Gemara is highlighted by large letters Gimel Mem with an apostrophe. So what has the standard traditional Gemara done? It's marked off the Mishnah from the Gemara. Well, what does the Daf Map do? We simply take that 1 and 2 and 3 steps further. We want to mark off, for example, the brises, the Tanaic literature that the Gemara quotes along the way. Tanu Rabbanon, Viraminu, Meisvei, all of the key words that introduce a Tanaic source. Not necessarily a Mishnah, could be a brisa. What do we do in Gemara markings in the Daf Map? We put a frame around those Tanaic sources. What happens when the Gemara starts a question? When you're looking at an unmarked Daf Gemara, you might catch a keyword like Meisvei or V'hatanya, which introduces a question. Where does the question end? Well, in Gemara markings, the Daf Map, you can see a vertical dashed line alongside the Gemara text with, let's say, a kuf standing for kushya at the beginning, and the end of the vertical dashed line indicates the line in which the question ends, so that you know all of the upcoming lines are devoted to a question. Likewise, the answer might be a long answer, or sometimes the Gemara makes a long point. All of these are highlighted in the Daf Map. What happens when the Gemara presents a series of whatever? It might be a series of comments made by HaRav Yehonasan. It might be a series of questions that are introduced by the term Tashma, which is abbreviated as Tav Shin. Well, in Gemara markings, we use a geometric symbol surrounding the name, if that is what's repeated. HaRav Yehonanan's name with a triangle around it. Let's say you have a few series unrelated or even related on the same page. So you'd want to have a different geometric form to highlight the different series. So therefore we have triangles, diamonds, we have crown shapes, we have bow tie shapes, all kinds of different shapes. Each shape has no inherent significance. All they do is highlight an upcoming series. Well, without any further ado, we would like in the next brief time that we have made available for this introduction to show you a couple of sample Dafim Gemara. We'll refer to them as PDF number 1 and PDF number 2 and number 3. We chose Pesachim, the very beginning of Maseches Pesachim. The Mishnah starts off with the expression Or Labasar, referring to the time for doing Bedikas Chametz. What does the word Or mean? So you can see on your PDF file, number 1, you see Daf Beis Amud Aleph. We've highlighted the names Rav Huna and Rav Yehuda at the very beginning of the Gemara. They argue, does Or mean evening, or does Or mean morning? On the side of our marked Gemaras, the Shas Ozer, which is the cornerstone of the Daf map, the map, it's our Shas Ozer mapped Gemaras, marked Gemaras, we feature topic headings, which we call nosei, and we feature structural notes, which we call mivneh, in the margin, so that even if you're not so familiar, the daf in front of you will explain what we are doing. It introduces the topic, and it also explains briefly what the markings will be doing on that page. So in this case, you can see a series of triangles, and they're also numbered. If you look closely, you'll notice the triangles change position. The top of the triangle pointing upwards starts off our sugya, but when you get to number 4, you see it flips over with the point facing down. In the margin, you can see under the heading Nosei, we've written Machlokes Befirush Hamila Or the Katani Bamishnah. There's a discussion, disagreement regarding what does the word Or mean. Rav Huna says it means Boker, and Rav Yehuda says it means Laila. With the triangle facing up, the Gemara is going to bring a proof. Letovas, you see under the Mivneh heading, Letovas Rav Huna. With the inverted triangle, it's Letovas Rav Yehuda. So on Daf Beis Amud Aleph, you can see the Gemara is going to bring in this case, psukim, numbers 1, 2, and 3 are in favor of Rav Huna's position, which means we're going to bring psukim indicating that Or means morning. Number 4, it flips around, and that's going to be a pasuk that's cited by the Gemara to show that Or means night, like Rav Yehuda said. And by the way, if you look closely at our marked Daf Beis Amud Aleph, you'll notice there's a dashed underlining. So when you see number 1, for example, you have a triangle, and then a pasuk is quoted, and it says Alma or Yevamos, indicating that at that stage in the Gemara, Or means morning. And number 2, you see again Alma or Yevamos. Skip to 4, Alma or Urta. Urta means night. And if you go to Beis, Amud Beis, in our PDF, you can see, you keep scrolling down, you see number 6, number 7 with the point facing up, number 8, it's inverted. In addition to that, you'll notice up till number 7, the sources that were cited to prove the respective sides were psukim. When you get to number 8, you see a frame, that's a Tanaic Source. And from 8 through 15, Tanaic sources are cited, and that's why you see frames along the way. In addition to that, we've indicated that there, with a squiggle underline, we've indicated in the margin under the Mivneh, Mekoros Shelo Nitfu. These are sources that are not dismissed or not refuted. These are sources that remain proving what they were intended to prove. And you'll notice that all of those that are squiggle underlined have triangles pointing face down, meaning like Rav Yehuda, it means night. And it's of no surprise that we do our Bedikas Chametz at night, because the sources here all indicate that the sources that are not refuted indicate thusly. And that continues, the markings of this particular sugya continue to Daf Gimel Amud Aleph, as you can see very clearly. Now we continue to our PDF number 2. this is from Maseches Shabbos, Daf Kuf Lamed Aleph Omid Beis, Perek Rav Lezer Demila. On this page, I ask every one of you, take a, what do you see? Well, you see diamonds, you see frames around Tanaic sources, and the diamonds appear in each one of these Tanaic sources. If you look closely, what do you see highlighted? Well, you see lulav, sukkah, matzah, shofar, and at the bottom you see milah. On the side, we have our nosei / mivneh. We combined the topic heading and structural into one. What do you see there? You see a diamond, and we've indicated sidra shel mitzvos, a series of mitzvos shemachshirav doichin es haShabbos aliba de Rebbe Elazar. The double underline highlights the Tana Rebbe Eliezer. He is of the opinion that materials needed to fulfill a mitzvah. Not just the actual mitzvah. But let's say you come on Shabbos, and according to the Doraisa law, you take a lulav on Shabbos. I know we don't practice that today, thanks to Rabba's gezerah, but technically speaking, a lulav is taken on Shabbos when the first day of Sukkot comes out on Shabbos. Let's say you don't have a lulav. You have to go to a tree to cut it off. Well, Rebbe Eliezer says you can do that. That's called machshirei mitzvah. Likewise with a sukkah. If you don't have a sukkah and you have to construct a sukkah, even if it's on Shabbos or Yontif, Rebbe Eliezer says you can do it. Likewise, matzah, shofar, and milah. The Gemara at each stage asks, and you see a dashed underline, you see in the Gemara, Minol Leila Rebbe Elazar, and that repeats itself after each one of these Tanaic sources. The Gemara is asking, how does Rebbe Elazar know that? So those are searches for the source. Isn't it wonderful? So you have a mapped Gemara right in front of you, and you know ahead of time what the Gemara is going to be involved with. For the whole Omid Gemara, with just a brief glance, you got the whole picture. That's the map. And we have our next PDF, number 3. Just another example along the same lines, but it gives you a feeling of what this is all about. You see Maseches Sotah Daf Lamed Ches. The Gemara there, you can see diamonds along the page, along the daf, and they highlight different expressions, B'Lashon HaKodesh, B'Amida, B'Nesias Kapayim, B'Shem HaMefurish. All of these are dealing with Birkas Kohanim, and there's a double underline highlighting the opening pasuk, Ko Sevarchu. And on the side, you can see that we've indicated under our nosei / mivneh, the double underline highlighting Kos Baruch the pasuk for Birkas Kohanim, for duchening, and diamonds. Sidra shel halachos v'inyonim hakshu nesias kapayim, the series of halachos and other details that are intertwined, that are connected with nesias kapayim, with duchening, shenidrashu me'a pasuk Kos Baruch, which are from this pasuk. Our final and concluding example is going to share with you a very brief sugya, not just an outline of what a daf with a series has on it, but a sugya which is in Bava Kamma, starting Daf Nun Hey Amid Beis. We have no intention of dealing with the content of the Gemara, but we are interested in presenting how a sugya is mapped out. So toward the bottom of Nun Hey Amid Beis, you see a Tanaic source, and on the side we also have a topic heading, the nosei, where we've written Potur midinei Odom v'chayav b'dinei Shamayim. There are different actions that a person does. They're wrong, they're improper actions, but the earthly court will not be able to penalize him, let's say, financially or otherwise, but in the heavenly court, in Dinei Shamayim, he is held responsible. So in that source, you notice there are numbers. We'll read them quickly. We're not going to explain them because that's not the intention of this introduction. Number 3, Number 4, now, each one of these things we indicate are chayav b'dinei shamayim, not b'dinei odam. You notice the triangles? Omar Mar, you'll see 4 triangles. 3 of them highlight Omar Mar, and the 4th one is simply number 4 from the original source that we read. Each one of these, we'll call them offenses, wrongdoings, are dealt with by the Gemara trying to understand why it's chayav only b'dinei shamayim and not b'dinei odom. So each one of these offenses are featured, and they are featured each one with the triangle, and that which follows is a quote from the original source that we read. When you finish with the Gemara presenting you each one of them why they are chayav b'dinei shamayim and not b'dinei odom, the Gemara has a long question on Nun Vav Amud Aleph, a third of the way down the page. Do you see between the Gemara and Rashi a vertical dashed line with a kuf encircled? A kushya. It's a long question. The essence of the long question is highlighted with the series of diamonds that you see. Each one of these diamonds indicates an additional case, and they are Tanaic sources which feature the cases, and in each one of them, additional offenses that are potter. Now, in the original source, it said there are 4, and we highlighted the number arba'ah in the original source. 4? Oh, really? Look at this. Count the diamonds, and you see an additional 5 diamonds, which would mean a total of 9 cases, which are chayav b'dinei shamayim and potter midinei odom. So why did the original source say only 4? That's the end of the long question. The Gemara then says, if you'll notice the line after the question ends, the Gemara says, in Mia Ika Tuva, there really are more cases that are Potter Midine Odom V'Chaya B'Dinei Shamayim. V'Hani, it's the Richle, the 4 that we presented, need to be featured or highlighted on their own. And the Gemara then explains, do you see the long answer, the tough that's encircled? That's a tshuva or a teretz with a vertical dashed line. All of these lines are dedicated to the answer. Do you notice a double underline, which is also one of our series markings? Those double underlines highlight each one of the cases in the original source, each one of the 4 cases. And the Gemara explains why it's necessary to feature them, and the Gemara explains, in those cases that were featured in the original source, the 4 cases, I would have thought that you're not chayav even b'dinei shamayim. And therefore, I have to be told in each one of the cases that he is chayav, at least we'll say, or at most only b'dinei shamayim. And that brings us to the end of our brief sugya introduction. And with that, we wish everyone great hatzloch in learning. Lahagdil Torah lahadira. Kol tuv.